I'm locked.
That happens every time they turn on the recording. I don't know why.
Okay, I think it's ready to go again. I'm taking it down then and starting again. Ah. Okay, here we go.
Artie, your video's stuck. It's not moving.
Oh, it's moving here. Okay. I'm trying to unpause it.
That's probably what you need to do.
Okay. I'm going to just go to the first slide and start. Or not. Is it working, Marge?
No.
Okay. I am sorry, people. We will try this one more time. Why do I have two up here? Okay.
Yeah, it kind of seemed like there were two of them going.
Okay. I don't understand it. It's not doing what I want. One more time. Sorry. I don't know how to get rid of that. Okay. It keeps going back to this. I don't know what I'm doing. It won't allow me to go to the next one. I'm trying one more time here.
It's weird.
Let me see if I can kill all of those. Okay. Now, how do I get screen share? Well, at least there's more people on here now. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see, what do you see on the screen, Marge? Do you see that?
Happy Halloween.
Yeah, you see that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where I'm trying to go. I'm doing slideshow from the current slide, and it goes back here every time.
Why don't you try closing, unsharing, then Close
I-
your PowerPoint and open it up again and
Okay.
put it on display mode first, just on your computer, and get it where you want it in display mode before you share screen. Try that.
It's right. It's ready. It's there.
Where are you on that one?
Slideshow. Okay. From current slide. All right. I don't know what to do. I think we'll just, it's not working.
If you
It
put it
was.
on that slide and you double click it, will it
I did.
appear?
I did that. It's there on my screen, but you guys can't see it.
So can
Um,
can you reshare it from there?
I'm trying. Okay. Maybe now.
So so we see the whole PowerPoint right now. So your whole thing's come up. So can you double click on the Halloween slide then? There you go. There it is.
Good morning. I'm Marty Kosmersky.
There you go.
I'll lead us
Thank
through
you.
the online service today.
Thank you, Marty.
We recommend that you set your screen to speaker mode for this service. Also, please remain on mute during the service. This is Common Ground Online, Pathways celebration of worship for people of many paths who are gathering virtually to share in the responsible search for meaning and truth. Pathways is a warm and open community where all who come with open minds and kind hearts are welcome, regardless of ability, age, race, gender identity, or sexual orientation. If you are visiting us for the first time today, we welcome you to our virtual service and hope you'll visit us in person when we can be together again. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. To send us a note about your visit or to ask more information about Pathways, email office@pathwaysuu.org. We hope that all who join us today find this a safe and inspiring online place to worship. This month's theme is cultivating relationships. Gathering in Our Own Spaces by Jeff May. We need to be together. We yearn for connection. We hunger for the familiar faces of friends, the sound of shared voices proclaiming who we are, where we are going. Our opening song this morning is Count on Me by Bruno Mars. With your mics remaining on mute, sing along at home and enjoy.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world to find you. If you ever find yourself lost in the dark and you can't see, I'll be the light to guide you. Find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, yeah. If you're tossing and you're turning and you just can't fall asleep, I'll sing a song beside you. And if you ever forget how much you really mean to me, every day I will remind you. Oh, find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. 'cause that's what friends are supposed to do. Oh yeah. Ooh, yeah, yeah. You'll always have my shoulder when you cry. I'll never let go, never say goodbye. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do. Oh yeah. Ooh, ooh. You can count on me 'cause I can count on you.
Today's virtual chalice lighting words are by Robin Slaw. As we light this chalice, we remember our relationships. We stay true to ourselves. We listen and communicate our needs. We promise to build a beloved community. We rebuild sanctuaries for all creatures and promise to heal the earth. We care. We always care. And now let's read together our Unitarian Universalist sacred promises. Love is the doctrine of Pathways Church. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other. As we cultivate relationships, we send this message to everyone we know. You've got a friend. Written by Carol King and performed by James Taylor, with your mics remaining on mute, please sing along.
When you're down and troubled and you need a helping hand, and nothing is going right. Close your eyes and think of me, and soon I will be there to brighten up even your darkest night. You just call up my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running. Oh yeah, babe, to see you again. Winter, spring, summer or fall, all you got to do is call, and I'll be there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You've got a friend. If the sky above you should turn dark and full of clouds, and that old north wind should call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running. Oh, yes, I will see you again. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, yeah. All you got to do is call, and I'll be there, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, ain't it good to know that you've got a friend when people can be so cold? They'll hurt you and desert you. Well, they'll take your soul if you let them. Oh, yeah, but don't you let them. You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again. Oh, baby, don't you know about winter, spring, summer, or fall? Hey, now all you've got to do is call. Lord, I'll be there, yes, I will. You've got a friend. You've got a friend, yeah. Ain't it good to know you've got a friend? Ain't it good to know you've got a friend? Oh, yeah, yeah, you've got a friend.
Today's call to worship words were written by Reverend Scott Taylor. Today, we return to the shelter of each other, to arms that hold us in the midst of the storm, to voices that help us hear our own, to hearts that accept us for who we are. May we be for each other a source of safety and sending. May we offer each other both comfort and challenge. May this place of peace lead us to share peace with others. Let us begin. Today's speaker, Dr. James W. Riddlesperger, Jr., has been a professor of political science at Texas Christian University since 1982. His interest is in American politics with emphasis in the presidency, Congress, and Texas politics. He is a prolific author and editor. He was the winner of the TCU Chancellor's Award for Creative Teaching and Research in 2017, and Honors Professor of the Year at TCU in 2012. He is a frequent consultant to news media about politics and elections, was the chief reader of the College Board's AP U.S. Government and Politics exam, and is past president of the Southwestern Political Science Association. He is married to Dr. Christina Riddlesperger. He is the father of 2 grown sons and the grandfather of 3 wonderful granddaughters and a brand new grandson. And now, let's welcome Dr. Riddlesperger back to our virtual pulpit.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Everybody can hear me. That's good. I guess all of us have become kind of proficient on Zoom these days, much to our chagrin, I think. I have spent now the last year and a half up until this fall teaching online, so I'm so familiar with Zoom. It's almost a second home. I told my students when we went back into the classroom this fall that I wanted them to all get these huge black poster boards and write their name in white block letters so that I would know what they look like because I'm so used to looking at that on Zoom. as I conduct class. Well, I'm thrilled to be with you all today, and I want to kind of ponder with you about what American politics is going to look like going forward. I think we're so caught in the moment at sometimes that things can look hopeless. And in fact, these days, as you know, politics in the United States is extraordinarily frustrating. The polarization levels that we see among our population, what some political scientists are now called affective polarization, which is a polarization where we just don't disagree with one another, but we begin to hate the people with whom we disagree. And that, of course, is a troubling thing for any society. So for me, it struck me as I saw the other week one estimate that said that the United States by 2041 would be a majority minority nation, which of course is an oxymoron to begin with, but gave me an interesting point of departure. Now, most demographers think that actually the United States will become majority minority about 2045, but there are some that say it could happen as early as 2041. And so it got me to think, well, what will American politics look like in 2041? And I want to share some of those observations with you all, because I think that what we need to do is begin to rethink who we are, or to put it another way, to go back to some of the fundamentals that have made it possible to govern in the United States over now more than 230 years. So the question is, what will the population of the United States look like in 2041? Will it be majority minority? And the answer is yes. That's about the time that the number of people who call themselves non-white will outpace the people who call themselves white in the United States. Of course, we've already reached that point in Texas in many ways. In fact, Texas has been a majority minority state now for 2 decades or more. And in fact, probably right now is a plurality Latino state. That is to say that there are more people who identify as Latino than identify as white. And of course, all of those categorizations get complicated, and I don't want to visit that particular topic today because we would end up not talking about anything else. So about 40% of people in the state of Texas are Latino, about 40% are white, about 12.5% black, and one of the other rapidly growing minority groups in Texas is Asian Americans, which is a group that was really not even on the screen 25 or 30 years ago and is now exceeding 5% of the population of Texas. So Texas is a rapidly changing environment, and of course, so is the rest of the United States. Now, what I really want to do is to tell us why we shouldn't be thinking about our population in this way. Or to put it another way, a subtitle might be, why should we use pre-Civil War categorizations to talk about who we are and what we look like? The truth is that it's misleading and it's inappropriate for us to talk about people based upon the color of their skin or their national origins or their sexual orientations or any other categorization that we like to divide people into, because the truth is that what we're seeing is the development of a far more pluralistic and multicultural society. And that's the key point in all of this. Not color of skin, not national origin, but rather the fact that there are many different kinds of people in the United States with many different lifestyles and many different things that they prioritize and many different things that they enjoy. In fact, if we want to just be brutal about it, about 3 in 10 Asian American born children this year will be multiracial. About 1 in 4 Hispanic children will be multiracial. About 1 in 5 Black children will be multiracial. And it seems silly to talk about those people as if they belong to one racial category or another. And so the good news is that among people in the younger people in the United States, we are, I hope, moving past some of those arbitrary categorizations that have misled American people for well more than a century and a half. In fact, mixed racial children are the most rapidly growing part of the American cultural makeup. And so I think it's so important for us to try to have a transformative understanding about race and ethnicity and heritage in the United States, and begin to think of things in a much broader way and a more accepting way than we have in the past. A second major thing that we need to look at by 2041 is the fact that by then the United States will no longer be the dominant economic power in the world. In fact, probably most estimates are that by about 2026 or 2028, China will outpace the United States to have the largest economy in the world. Now, that too is a complicated formula because, of course, it depends on how you compare nations, and China does not have the kind of open capitalistic economy that we do, and so some of the numbers become difficult to compare. But that really doesn't matter. Certainly by 2041, not only will China have a larger economy than the United States, but so too will India. Now, it's not really surprising. Both of those nations have more than 4 times the population of the United States. So the United States will still be wealthier on a per capita basis than those nations. But the size of their economies is going to not only outpace the United States, but rapidly outpace the United States. And so we're going to be seeing some transformative differences in terms of the way people in the world peg their economic growth. Since World War II, the United States has been so dominant, almost hegemonic in the economic growth in the world, that Americans have begun to think of the world as an economy that revolves around the United States. And in fact, if we look with any clarity at all, we will see that that will not be the case very soon. And certainly by 2041 to 2050, we'll see the United States moving rapidly as into a group of people worldwide, and that the national economy of the United States will not be dominant in the way that it has been throughout our entire lifetimes. The most rapidly growing economies in the world right now are in Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Mexico. So not in the part of the world that Americans have mostly identified with, which is Europe. And in fact, what we're seeing is that we are going to become a much more Asia-centric world than we are right now. Asia has the largest populations in the world and has some of the most rapidly growing economies in the world. And that has all sorts of consequences, one of which is that the nations of Asia are not nearly as committed, at least ideologically, to the notion of capitalism as people in the United States and Europe have been for now, well, since Adam Smith wrote the Wealth of Nations in 1776, the same year that Thomas Jefferson penned our Declaration of Independence. And that means that the economic priorities in the world are going to be different. We're going to see people having different kinds of ways of thinking about how wealth should be invested, what the role of wealth in the world economy should be, and how we might best go about being good stewards of the wealth in the world. This is going to be a profound change. No one knows, of course, exactly what it's going to look like, but I think it's really important for us to understand that the context that we understand the world economy in is going to be much different in 2041 than it is today. What about religion? As you know, the United States has always been a nation of religious people. We have prided ourselves, in fact, on being a nation that was founded on the principle of religious freedom. Now, I think it's so important for us to understand that by religious freedom back then, we were talking about mostly religious misfits, people who did not fit in the religious climate of Europe and came to the United States to exercise their religious freedom in ways that were not really socially acceptable in England. And if you have to go much beyond thinking about what the thoughts of the pilgrims were, you don't have to go very far to imagine how kind of zealous many of the people who came to the United States were and why they were misfits in Europe. But as recently as the end of World War II, about 76% of the American population was weekly worshipers. That is to say that they attended church of one kind or another, a church or a synagogue or a very small number that went to, for example, mosques, or to Unitarian churches before the merger. But the United States was very much a church-going nation at the end of World War II. Today, that number is less than 50%. About 47% of Americans are regular churchgoers, and we don't even use the term weekly churchgoers anymore. It used to be that we did. Now we just ask whether people are regular churchgoers, and regular churchgoers normally means once a month or more frequently, as we define it, or as the Pew Foundation defines it. So we're a rapidly diminishing church attending nation. And over 1 in 5 Americans today claim no religious affiliation whatever. Or as I like to put it, the most rapidly growing part of the American religious population is nuns. And I don't mean that in the N-U-N-S sense, I mean that in the N-O-N-E-S sense. We have fewer people who are church affiliated with churches today than we have in the past. And all segments of the American population are declining in terms of their church attendance. Or to put it another way, about 2/3 of people who were born before World War II remain regular churchgoers. Only 58% of baby boomers are churchgoers. And if you go down among people born in the 1960s and beyond, those numbers go down below 50% and way down among millennials down below 40%. About 30% of people born in the 1980s and 90s attend church on a regular basis. So and so if you extrapolate going forward, you'll see that most of the people who are dying are church attenders, and most of the people who are being born are not church attenders. And so it doesn't take much to imagine that churches in the United States, at least those huge temples and bricks and mortar churches that have so characterized the culture of the United States, are diminishing rapidly, and that many of the great temples in the United States will become museums, much like those temples in Europe have become, if you've traveled in Europe. What's the most rapidly growing religion in the world today? Well, the answer is not Christianity or Unitarianism. It is Islam. Islam is by far the biggest and most rapidly growing religion in the world today. It's still a minority religion, but within another 25 or 30 years, there will be as many Muslims in the world as there are Christians. And in fact, interestingly, those who are switching away from religion these days are more likely Christians than anyone else. In fact, the Pew Foundation estimates that about 66 million people worldwide will switch away from Christianity over the next 25 to 30 years. That does not necessarily mean that they're going to switch to other religions. In fact, perhaps a plurality of people switching away from Christianity will be switching to no religion at all, rather than to another religion. What are the most rapidly growing parts of Christianity in the United States? Well, those are the very conservative Christians. And so Christianity, which used to be an affiliation that covered a broad swath of people, everything from Pentecostals and very conservative Orthodox Christians to people who had very liberal views about Christianity in the world. The truth is that the parts of the Christian movement that are declining are the liberal parts, and it's becoming a much more illiberal religion, not only in the United States, but worldwide. And if we think about religious attendance, even by political affiliation, we see declines in religious attendance. It's down about 12% among Republicans, down around 18% among independents, and down about 25% among people who call themselves Democrats. So religion is moving, we're moving away from religion. Now, what is that going to mean in terms of values-based decision-making in government? It's hard to say, right? I mean, certainly there are many elements of that change that we could certainly identify as perhaps positive if we are moving away from the kinds of decision-making that prefer people with certain religious views over people with other religious views, as we have through much of American history. On the other hand, what does the absence of a moral imperative do for decision making in a government? And I think that that's something that we also have to ponder because we all bring our values to our political discussions and to our political decision making. And if we move away from the religious values that have been fundamental to the growth of the American Republic, what replaces those? And I think that's something too that we're going to have to kind of grapple with as a nation moving forward. What about party affiliation? How is that changing? Well, in fact, party affiliation has been relatively stable over time. There's been a diminishing number of people in the United States calling themselves Republicans, but the number of people who call themselves Democrats and independents is relatively stable over the last 25 years. Republican Party affiliation is down about 5%, but that has not yet been reflected in voting patterns. Many people who call themselves independents, in fact, have relatively predictable voting patterns. And so many of the people who used to call themselves Republicans and no longer call themselves that remain Republicans in terms of their voting pattern. So that's something to keep your eye on as well. I think what has changed mostly with regard to the political parties is that, as Morris Fiorina, a professor at Stanford University, has said, is that we have resorted our party affiliation in the United States. And by that, I mean, well, it used to be that we had liberals, moderates, and conservatives in both political parties, and that's no longer the case. The Democratic Party has become a party of predictably liberal voters, and the Republican Party has become a party of predictably conservative voters. That is something that has, where the big divides in American politics are no longer between regions of the country. You know, we can't say that the North is liberal and the South is conservative anymore, although those tendencies still remain. The truth is that urban areas in the country are liberal and non-urban areas are conservative. And that is true across the country. I like to point out that Salt Lake City, the home of Mormonism, is a reliably Democratic community. Birmingham, Alabama, is a reliably Democratic voting city. Atlanta has become a center of liberal political voting, not just in the South, but in the nation as a whole. And we see in Texas that every major city in Texas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, and El Paso, all are Democratic leaning, even though the state of Texas has remained a fairly predictably conservative voting state. but the nation is urbanizing and continues to urbanize. What will that mean for politics? Well, it's going to transform politics in some very profound ways. But more than anything else, with regard to the sifting of people into a liberal Democratic Party and a conservative Republican Party, we have created a situation where the people who nominate our candidates for public office tend to be the most hot-blooded of people in the country. That is to say, that it is conservative Republicans that dominate the nomination process of the Republican Party, to the point where most Republican office holders in the United States are more worried about their nominating constituency, that is, whether they can get a nomination from the Republican Party, than they are about winning a general election. The same is true to a lesser degree in the Democratic Party. And what it has meant is that the 20% most conservative people dominate the Republican nominating process, and the 20 or 25% most liberal people in the United States dominate the Democratic nominating process. And that means that in the middle, we have a group of people that Thomas Edsall in the New York Times has referred to as the exhausted majority, people who are unhappy with the polarized decision-making processes we have in the United States. Now, among young voters, these trends are also changing. It turns out that while overall party affiliation is relatively static, among our youngest voters, among the millennials and Generation Z voters, that is, people born after 1981 and of voting age in the United States, about 51% of those voters are Democratic, compared to only about 35% of Republican voters. So there is a huge change afoot among younger voters in terms of their political preferences. So this is all really enlightening. And what separates voters now is more education than anything else. We used to talk about income and social status as the dominating features of American voting. That's no longer the case. Education, beginning in the 2016 election, became the biggest divider among voters, with more educated voters voting for Democrats and less educated voters voting for Republicans. That was never the case before 2016, but that is a trend that has happened and is growing. And moreover, that trend is a gendered trend. More and more college education in the United States is becoming the bailiwick of young women, not of young men. Over 56% of our college students in the United States today are women, a profound change from 40 years ago. And more than 60% of our college graduates this year will be women. That is to say, not only are there more women in colleges than there are men, but in general, they're much better students than men. And while this isn't the focal point of my presentation, I think that this is one of the most profound changes taking place in our society today, and it's going to be reflected in our politics. Women are 27% more likely to attend college these days than men. And the Wall Street Journal has commented that there is, quote, a generation of American men who have given up on college, and that's going to be a profound change in American democracy by definition. It leads to a devaluation of education among men, since they are more and more unable or unwilling to compete with women in the education system. And I don't think any of us have contemplated what that may mean, but let me just give you one profound question, and then we'll move on for the moment. And that is, are educated young women going to seek uneducated young men as their life partners? Are they going to want to be families with them and to conceive children with them? And the answer is, at least right now, our partial evidence is not so much. It turns out that women don't want to marry young men who are not as educated as they are. And that's going to lead to all sorts of changes in our society, I think, that again, we have not yet begun to contemplate. Now, one other thing that I think we have to understand is that the issues that separate us are also generational in nature, and that that the politics of the United States are going to change profoundly in terms of how we perceive important elements of American public policy. So, for example, among young people, and here again, I'm talking about millennials and Generation Z, that is, those born after 1981, they're much more supportive of an activist government. That is to say, they see the government as something that should help resolve problems in society, such as healthcare, welfare, and education. They are much more liberal on climate change issues. They are much more likely to say that Black people have been unfairly by American society. They are much more supportive of same-sex marriage. Only 15% of millennials and Generation Z people disapprove of same-sex marriage, for example. They're more likely not to read political news. They're far more likely to read entertainment news and technology news than they are political news. And so we have a real change in terms of knowledge base of our younger voters, and not for the better. They're more likely to say immigrants are a strength for the growth of the American economy, rather than we should build a wall between the United States and other nations of the world. They also believe that, quote, too many people are easily offended in our society, that people ought to be more accepting of criticisms levied at them and less likely to react as a snake would by striking back at people who disagree with them. And they're particularly judgmental about older people for having that characteristic, that people who are baby boomers and older have clung to old ideas that have affected younger people in adverse ways. So that's an ongoing issue. Now, I hope that I have at least given you some new information to chew on, because I think that each of these changes taken alone suggest a profoundly different America 20 years from now than we have now. When you combine all of them together, I think that it gives us a picture of an America that looks so entirely different than it does now, that I don't think our government system has even begun to contemplate what is going to be the nature of decision making in the United States in just one generation from now. How can we cope with these coming changes? Well, I think that there are at least 5 imperatives that we have to accept. One is that we need to become, as a society, much better listeners than we are now. Americans are good about talking. We're not very good about listening. I like to quote one of my favorite politicians of earlier generations, Sam Rayburn, who said that the most important organ on any politician is his ears. And if we cannot, as a society, learn to listen to one another and to listen to the differences that people have in terms of their racial characteristics and ethnic characteristics, in terms of their economic priorities, in terms of their religious affiliations, in terms of their political affiliations, and in terms of their political policy preferences. If we don't listen, we are not going to be able to cope with what are going to be transforming differences over the next 20 to 25 years. And I think we're doing, at least so far, a very poor job of that. Secondly, we need to start thinking. Of course, the cliche is to think outside the box. I've never really liked that cliche, but we need to think bigger. We need to think bigger. For us, for example, who are religious, who think about the divine and whatever that means to us, whether it be a God or some kind of a ethereal presence beyond us, One thing we know about that kind of a presence is that it thinks far larger than we're capable of doing as humans. And I think one of the things that we have to learn to do is to get outside of ourselves, outside of our prejudices and limitations, and think about politics in transformative ways moving forward. Third, I think we have to be much more accepting of differences among us. We can no longer afford to simply think that people like us should govern the world. That is not going to be possible. It's not possible today, and it's going to become less possible over time. The Eurocentric decision-making that has dominated world culture now for more than a century, or more than several centuries, and the American-centric values that have dominated the world for the last 80 years simply are not going to be big enough to govern the world moving forward in the next generation. Fourth, I think we have to learn that our political system has to be our broker of differences among ourselves. This is something James Madison understood very well when the Constitution was constructed in 1787. As he liked to put it, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. And he said we can't be in the business of censoring ideas. What we have to do is be in the business of finding ways for those with different ideas to be able to present their ideas and to work together with those with different ideas to make government decisions in which all people, regardless of their viewpoints, can thrive. And that means that we have to give up some core values that we have for the purpose of the greater good. If we cannot do that, we're not going to be able to govern moving forward. Finally, we have to understand that decisions in the United States are made through elections, and that once elections are over, they're over, and that we have to move forward in our decision making despite the fact that we are disappointed in the outcomes of elections. If we cannot do that, we simply cannot govern. And if we cannot govern, the future of American democracy, I think, is very much in jeopardy. So the challenges are there before us, and I think that the challenges are self-evident, as Ben Franklin said when he changed the language that Thomas Jefferson first used in the Declaration of Independence. We must understand that the world is going to be a profoundly different place in 20 years than it is today, and that if we are not willing to engage in transformative political decision-making, we're simply not going to be able to govern moving forward. And I will leave you with that thought today, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Riddlesperger, for that look into the future. Stick around after the service, and we will have time to have discussion and ask Dr. Riddlesperger more questions. Obviously, the best reason for cultivating relationships is we are all in this together. And now, with your mics remaining on mute, enjoy Blue Boat Home.
I feel no motion standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known.
ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
We hope that each of you, on your individual path through joys and questions of life, found some common ground with your virtual travelers today. Every Sunday is new and different at Pathways. We hope you will join us for Common Ground Weekly. Our virtual chalice extinguishing was written by Mark Morrison Reed. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed.
Did you say something?
Today's benediction was written by Reverend Scott Taylor. We must remember to go slow. It's the secret so rarely mentioned. Simply put, relationships are really hard to build when we are running. Wait, before we go, we have 3 more things to say. Our November circle dinner has been postponed until the building opens. Our December 11th circle dinner will be a holiday celebration. The location has not been set yet. January 8th, we will start our new season of circle dinners in people's homes. If you want to sign up as a host or a guest, send an email to marty@pathwaysuu.org. If you also have a place for the December 11th event, send an email and tell us. Thank you. If you have a few extra bucks to donate this month, don't forget our outreach partner, Muslim Community Center for Human Services. The services they give are regardless of religion, ethnicity, race, or place of residence. Stephen Braun will lead today's Harried Reasoners discussion. They will discuss the book, The Way Out, How to Overcome Toxic Polarization. Thank you. And now let's unmute and have a discussion with Dr. Riddlesperger.